So now we know what you've
someone.
got. You've got the bottles
Yes.
that you planted.
Slide now. Yep, slide now.
So when do you want to do the introduction?
Officially at 7 p.m. That's because we have set this.
Okay.
Yep, but we need the audience know we are here.
Okay.
我可以睇下大概有幾多人？哦，啲問題。
Video. You want to refresh it.
So Mac, you are releasing your new vintage soon, right? So how are you going to do it? Do it online, or you just do a tasting in your the grace room?
We've got a little new release coming out end of next week, and that will be, we're trying to do a Zoom webinar. So it's a bit like you.
What's that, Mac?
A chance to spend more money on technology that will fail equally well.
Yeah, okay.
So because it's a village tier instead of single vineyard, we haven't done that before. So we're just trying to, it was a total can of worms, opening up, sort of talking about broader strokes. So we've sort of got a bit of support material to try to explain some of those differences. Yeah, so that'll be next Thursday. We'll see. We haven't got much to sell. It's just more a concept we're trying to get across the line, I guess.
Yep. Hi guys.
What time?
We will start now.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Hello， 大家好啊！咁歡迎喺我哋第一次嘅 Woodlands Hour 現場直播啊。So welcome to join our first ever Woodlands Hour live tasting. So my name is Frankie. So next to me we have Jeremy and also Ben. So quite obvious we are from Woodlands Wine. Yep. So because today our topic is talking about the Yarra Valley's Pinot Noir. So because of this special occasion, we have invited a few producers from Yarra Valley. So in the screen, there is a split screen there. So when you look at the screen, you can see a few producers. We have Sarah from Yarra Yering, and also we have Mac from the namesake winery, Forbes Winery, and also Simon from Denton Wines. So because I think because we are live, so you can see all the audience and see you directly from the screen. I think this is the best way for you to talk to the customer directly. So you can, maybe let them introduce yourself, let them know how about your winery. So maybe you guys one by one and introduce yourself first. So, because ladies first, so maybe Sarah, you talk first.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Frankie. And I didn't realise this was the first one. It's very special. So it's nice to be part of it. So Sarah Crowe, for the winemaker at Yarra Yering Vineyards in the beautiful Yarra Valley, just 1 hour out of Melbourne. There it is. Thank you. Oh, I brought my own too.
Oh.
So Yarra Yering is one of the oldest vineyards in the Yarra Valley, and to be honest, it's such a privilege to be the winemaker there and looking after that vineyard. It was planted in 1969, and at the time, 50 years ago or 51 years ago, people in the Yarra Valley is a cool climate, so people were looking for warm sites and all-day sunshine. So the location, the site that was chosen faces north. It's quite a warm site in regards to the Yarra Valley. And for instance, Mac will probably talk about his different locations and how the climate changes a lot between those vineyards, whereas we just work off the one vineyard, and we're in kind of Yarra Central, and that's one of the warmer locations. So whilst we can grow Pinot Noir because the overall climate in the Yarra Valley is a cool climate, our particular site is one of the warmer sites, and that's why we're probably more well known with your customers for our dry red wine #1, our Bordeaux blend, so Cabernet dominant plantings on the vineyard. But Pinot for me, since the first vintage there, 2014, and really I was most interested in Shiraz, so I'm talking about everything but Pinot yet. The Pinot is a smaller production, and I had a great interest in Pinot Noir, having worked in Oregon for a few harvests, but also the Rhone Valley, so my interest in Shiraz. But Pinot was really something that I was quite excited to be working with. The Cabernet scared me the most, Pinot for me, I think, since I've been there, is the wine that it's probably evolved the most. Because we're a warm site, it's usually a fairly robust and tannic wine, or historically it's been a fairly robust and tannic style of Pinot Noir. So I've been doing a lot of work with our vineyard manager and really trying to bring a lot of fragrance and perfume and a bit more slipperiness and silkiness into the wine in the last few years. So that's kind of where we've been heading. And I think when we got to 2017, which is the wine that you and I are drinking tonight, we really managed to get the balance right, just what I was hoping to achieve.
Yep. Thanks, Sarah. So next, maybe, yes, Simon, you can talk about yourself and your winery. And also, I think, because your wine have a very interesting label, I think the audience would be quite interested to hear about what is the story behind it. Yep.
All right. Well, my name's Simon Denton. So I'm from Denton Vineyard and Winery. It's my family's vineyard. We planted just over 20 years ago. We started with Pinot Noir, so that's very relevant to what we're talking about tonight. The wine we're doing is the 2017 Denton. This comes from we have a very cone-shaped hill full of granite, which is quite unique for the Yarra Valley. And we're in the northern part of the Yarra Valley. So a bit like Sarah, we're in the warmer part. So we get this wine from the northeastern slope, a little bit cooler, so it retains the freshness. And it's also a close planted part of the vineyard, so 1 by 1.5 metre spacing. So this gives a bit more power while also retaining that lightness and elegance that we're really looking for. Pinot Noir, for me, it's always been part of the Yarra Valley, and I think it's really synonymous with it. The future of it is interesting, I think, as things get warmer and warmer. And I guess we'll talk a bit later because we do Nebbiolo, and we think that's a big future for the Yarra Valley as well. So the label, as you can see, it's not a rat. Okay. This was actually painted by my great uncle in the 1880s. So it's a little oil painting that we have in our house, and it's actually called Sympathy. And if you look closely, there is a mouse sitting on a dinner plate, and on the corner of the dinner plate is a fly looking at the mouse with sympathy, we think. But the irony for me is if the mouse was alive, it would probably eat the fly. And I guess for us, it was just something that was very much part of the family and a little bit quirky and a little bit different, but it's nothing to do with what's in the wine.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Very interesting story. Yep.
Winemakers, I mean, tell us some of the stuff that goes into wine. Come on, let's be honest.
Blood, sweat, tears.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Simon. So maybe the last, maybe Mac, you can talk about yourself and your winery. Yep.
Okay, well, thanks for
How long
having
have we got?
me. Beg your pardon, Simon?
No, good, please.
We don't really like each other much. So I was born in the Yarra Valley, and I guess the thing that I came back and started my little operation in 2005, and I guess it's so great, even just in the snapshot of hearing Simon and Sarah talk, it sums up what I love about the Yarra. And there's incredible history. The history goes back to the 1800s. But there is incredible diversity as well. And you hear Sarah sort of try to talk about Pinot in the context of a range of other things that Yarra Yering are doing, Simon in, with the range of what he's doing with Nebbiolo and other things. And it's, I guess, the curiosity of it's a complicated region. There's a huge mountain range that has a huge impact on certain areas and less so on others. The soils are hugely diverse. The climate is wildly diverse. And as you can already see here, the people are diverse. And we're really lucky with that, because I think rather than just having one strip of vines that produce quite similar profiles on the same soil, our challenge is far greater to understand what it is that makes Yarra Valley unique, because it is so complicated, but it's that complication that keeps, I guess, the learning incredibly steep. And potentially on the back of climate, the seasons getting earlier, which Simon mentioned, is that we've got the opportunity to explore parts of the Yarra that haven't been planted before, and then to adapt to the areas that have been historically planted as well. So it's an incredibly dynamic place, and we're 1 hour from Melbourne, which I think also means we've got this incredible influx. A lot of bloody sommeliers come out and think they're going to, make the next wine. But what it does do is it keeps bringing fresh ideas to the region, and so we don't get particularly set in our ways. And it means that we do, I guess there's a lot of experimentation and a lot of wines that sometimes walk the line of, maybe what you think you like or you don't like, but part of the growth is exploring those things. And so for me, the curiosity is exploring those sites. Everyone's got their own shtick, I guess, and mine is trying to understand our soils and just what the breadth of the Yarra actually means. And we've got these amazing old soils that are 200 to 400 million years old, and they've got incredible stories to tell. And I think it's something about us growing up as a nation, and I guess as someone who grew up in the Yarra Valley, to say we're starting to understand the soils we walk, which seems to be so natural to producers in Europe because they've done it for generations. Well, we're starting to walk our own walk and have our own story, and I love that.
Yep, thanks, Matt. So thanks, guys. So I think now all the audience have some basic information about you guys and also your wine. But I have a question, because for Australian red wine, I think most of the audience would directly think about Shiraz. Australian red wine, of course, is the most famous. But in Yarra is a little bit different. So although the grow good Shiraz, but at the same time, the Pinot Noir is the regional hero. So you can do really magnificent Pinot Noir. So the question is very easy. I think the audience also interested to know. So why Pinot Noir? Why Yarra Valley can make good Pinot Noir?
Will we just all take a turn? For me, I think it's the climate. So if you look at the Pinot Noir grape as it's growing, the grape itself has thin skins, and so it can't handle too warm a climate. When we pick the Pinot Noir in the Yarra Valley, it's actually the skins most years are still what I call crunchy. They've got this nice little bite to them, and that's also why we use a lot of whole bunch and whole berry fermentation in our Pinots, because the skin holds its shape and we get that internal berry fermentation, and a lot of that has to do with our climate and the integrity of the berry skin through the growing season and then into harvest. So for me, that's got a lot to do with it. And even though we're one of the warmer sites, it's really that climate, and that sun is not so intense for very long here, and cool nights, so we keep the beautiful fragrance and acidity as well. Anyone else?
Yeah, so I'd concur. Obviously, it's about climate. It's about that cool climate viticulture. For me, Yarra Valley wines have always been about elegance and finesse, and Pinot Noir always speaks of that. But there's also, I think, going back to 20 years ago when we started planting, Pinot Noir was becoming the hot grape. So around the world, people were becoming much more interested in it. So the market is also one of the biggest factors in the reason that we have a lot of Pinot Noir planted. Mac, why do you have Pinot?
Pinot is a pretty good vehicle lens to look at place. I mean, I think it's obviously got some pretty good recognition in a few parts of the world, and typically it's a terrific way to examine a place. When Domaine Chandon came out in the 80s, it did precipitate a huge number of smaller plantings where I think, small farmers were thinking, well, we can put some Pinot in and some Chardonnay, because this, big French company that, has landed on our doorstep is obviously recognised this area for Pinot and Chardonnay, and we should be planting it. So a lot of the Pinot that we work with now have been fortunate to pick up vines with a bit of age that were planted early enough to sort of try to ride the Chandon sparkling bubble, and actually it's provided a fantastic opportunity to explore what it means to move across the valley as one grape variety. Whereas, you know, where we're looking at new varieties like Nebbiolo and things like that, maybe it's more specific to parts of the valley and maybe less widely planted. So it's an examination of the grape and the suitability. And Pinot for me is more about looking at what the Yarra Valley is in terms of soils and climate.
Yep, thanks, Mac. Oh,
Mac, did you mean to say sparkling bubble?
Probably. I can't remember.
好，咁但係我哋講翻先，因為如果啱啱入嚟嘅觀眾啦，咁我哋今日講緊 Yarra Valley Pinot Noir 嘅，咁我哋有3個 producer 啦，咁有 Denton， 咁有 Yarra Yering， Forbes 喺度嘅。咁but by the way, Matt, because today we are drinking one of your Pinot Noir, which is the Yarra Yering. So because we know that apart from the Yarra Yering, you have also the Yarra Junction, different kind of Pinot Noir. So your idea is you want to bring about a regional difference or single vineyard idea Pinot Noir you want to make in Yarra Valley?
Yeah, I mean, they're all, so Yarra is a township. Yarra Junction is a township. So it's about sharing place. And I'm not coming into this, I guess, this project thinking there is definitely a difference and I'm going to tell the story. It's more a question of what are the differences and can we find them? And I guess part of that question was, is there even a difference? So I think the thing that's really exciting is there are pockets of the Yarra Valley now that have got recognisable traits that all sit under the Yarra Valley sort of overarching style and you know, that we do recognise as Yarra, but there are pockets now that have their own characters that are also becoming recognised. So whether it's, you know, within the Yarra region or the Yarra Junction region or Coldstream, they all have slightly different soils, slightly different climate, and the wines present differently. And that's, you know, that's what my objective is.
Right. We have questions here for all of you. Speaking about the Pinot Noir from Australia, I think the Yarra Valley and also Tasmania is pretty famous because of so close to the airport and it's very tourist friendly. Question here is, what's the difference between the Pinot from Yarra and Tassie? So maybe Sarah, can you chip in some of your thought?
Yeah, okay. So I guess, you know, it's a little bit further south, so it's getting closer to Antarctica. So their growing season is shifted a bit later in the year than us. And it's also, I think, because of their climate, their ripening period is a bit more elongated. And so I think, you know, once again, it's the climate that kind of impacts on the wine style. But for me, the wines out of Tasmania, because of that elongated ripening period and the hang time that they have on the vine, they always have a lot of fruit concentration. And so once again, I mean, Tasmania's, whilst it's quite small, it's also pretty diverse as far as grape growing. So around Hobart is very, very dry, and up in near Launceston in the Tamar is actually quite wet also. So there are differences, but broadly speaking, I would say their climate leads to more hang time on the vine and then this darker fruit flavor profile.
Right. Here is another question here for you guys. After that, I need to go back to this topic because I know one of you have some projects down there in Tasmania later on. So because we got Jeremy here, so Jeremy has been in Australia for 20 years. So he's our new OL guy. And then, so what do you see the transformation about the winemaking style in Yarra in the last 20 years, I guess?
Well, I think that it's been covered quite a bit, and obviously the winemakers of Yarra can answer this question better than me. But I think that the changes, I think, is a lot is to do that new generation and looking more at terroir than it used to. Pinot is also fairly new, as Mac alluded to with Chandon planting so much. The older vines, I think, originally was a lot of Cabernet there and a lot of Shiraz, as Yarra Yering has. So I think Pinot is newer to many parts of the Yarra, so it's a younger generation coming in. So I don't remember many of the old ones. I remember the newer styles of Yarra Pinot and the styles that you guys all make. But I think we'll just see more and more differentiation based on site. And I think you've alluded to some projects going on that. But I think we'll see more and more producers producing individual site Pinots rather than necessarily one house Pinot that's blended.
Yeah. And also that you guys are, because usually when we talk about the Yarra Valley as a whole region, and we are all tasting the wine from the same region, but obviously when we taste your wine now is pretty different. So I guess let's go back to the site, I would say interpretation, and also how you do your winemaking. So Simon, so is it then the youngest one across the three winery that we are talking about today?
In terms of vine age?
Wine age, and also when do you start your project?
So we started around 20 years ago. So 22 years ago, we bought the property. The vines that this wine comes from, the 2017 Pinot, they're about 12 years old, 13 years old, the close planted part. So yeah, we are still very young. I mean, compared obviously to Sarah at Yarra Yering that have been around for 50 years, like even longer than me.
I haven't been around for 50 years.
Not you. I meant Yarra Yering. You're the youngest winemaker in the Yarra Valley, aren't you?
I just look the youngest.
Yes, okay, that's it. So well, I mean, we're still learning all the time, and I think this is the thing. And both Mac and Sarah would say this. You know, each year you're learning something else, especially about your own sites and what's possible. Each year presents different challenges. I guess what we're trying to do, especially with the Denton label, is have wines of elegance and finesse that represent where we're from, our particular vineyard, but then also represent the Yarra Valley in a greater sense. So, you know, we're always after purity and finesse, and I think and freshness. They're the things that I look for.
So by the way, Sarah, I have a question I want to ask you, because it's also a little bit related to the Pinot Noir. Because we know that Pinot Noir is of course in Yarra Valley very popular, but you have made a very special one, which is this one, which is the light red, the brand of the Pinot Noir, also the Shiraz. So it's quite rare. I think that is very rarely seen in anywhere in Australia. So what comes in your mind you want to make this kind of rare brand?
Surprise.
Ben, I do you a favor and look what you do to me.
Yeah.
I moved to Yarra Yering from the Hunter Valley, and back in the 50s, there's a very famous winemaker who would often put a little bit of Pinot into his Shiraz, and it was very well known, but nobody knew quite how much he used to put in. And these wines have this amazing beauty and ageability. I've been lucky enough to try some wines from the 50s and 60s that not the 60s, from the 50s that he made. And it didn't really come to me immediately, but I was experimenting a little bit, the Shiraz on the vineyard, and made this really 100% whole bunch, fragrant, juicy, very approachable Shiraz one year, which was great. But it didn't really fit the Yarra Yering mold. So whilst I learned something and I really enjoyed it, I actually didn't have a product for it to go to. And then this idea came to me. Well, let's have a look at putting a bit of Pinot Noir with that Shiraz and see what happens. And it was really juicy, fragrant, delicious. It was one of those wines that you drink without even noticing that you're drinking. It was just so thirst quenching, smashable. So you know, when you're having a good afternoon. So I guess also for us at that point in time, all of our wines were very well known for needing a bit of bottle maturation and cellaring. So to put a wine out like this that was really youthful and approachable, didn't really interfere with the products that people really knew and loved from Yarra Yering, but gave us an opportunity to say to people, here's a delicious glass of Yarra Yering. It's from this vintage this year. Just drink it and smash it. I give you permission to drink Yarra Yering. That's what it says.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Oh, a little bit advertisement time. So for all the audience, if you want to find this very rare bottle, you can directly go to watsonswine.com and you can add it in the cart and then you can buy it. Yeah, because it's very rare.
I swear to all of you, Hong Kong is the only one outside of Australia to get this wine.
It's true.
Yep. So next, maybe Max. So also have a question for you. So we have a bottle of the Pinot Meunier here. So well, it's quite unique, yeah, because seldom have people bottle a single variety Pinot Meunier. So what comes in your mind to craft this wine?
We had the opportunity. It's 26-year-old vineyard, and I think once again it was planted with the view, obviously, of being suitable for sparkling. 3 soil types across 1 acre, sort of black clay, grey loam and red volcanic. It was quite a weird mix, and walking through and tasting the fruit, it was, Meunier is so different. I'd never worked with it before, and we've got this label EB, experimental batch, and it kind of forces us not to do the same thing every year. If we've got a parcel of fruit, we're not sure exactly what to do with it, but we played with it the year prior. The challenge is to keep trying new things. And when we start repeating ourselves, it's not really an experiment anymore. So I guess we've played around. We have made sparkling from the Meunier. We've blended it with Pinot Noir. We've tried a few different things, but I think with the 42, it was quite a lot of whole bunch. Looking really at the fragrance, that they're big berries, really lots of perfume. Also quite a lovely sort of earthy undertone there, and I guess the challenge is how we interact with this fruit when we don't have that connection over a long period of time. And so the face value interaction of tasting the fruit and not being able to reference other wines means we really have to make decisions with what's immediately in front of us. And so lots of, it's all old oak, and it's about preserving the perfume and that fragrance that was so powerful when we fruit.
I didn't know you had that, Mac. I'll have to come and grab a couple of bottles. I'm excited.
Yeah, sorry.
You didn't tell me about it. How rude.
Watson's apparently.
Oh, really? Okay.
All the secrets are out tonight.
Yes.
Actually not all.
So for Simon, yeah, because we apart from the Pinot Noir, we also have your Nebbiolo here. So we know that we want to know that why you want to craft a Nebbiolo. But by the way, I know that Mac now is also doing Nebbiolo. You have a single variety bottle of the Nebbiolo. So, but Simon, why do you have your mind want to make a Nebbiolo here? Yep.
So we started grafting some Cabernet vines over in 2010 to Nebbiolo, and sort of joined together with our current winemaker, Luke Lambert, who's also a really wonderful Yarra Valley winemaker. I guess at the time it was really based on Luke and I, our friendship and our thoughts about Nebbiolo and where it might have a place in the Yarra Valley. But it was also born out of, we started out trying to make a classic Yarra Bordeaux blend, which I guess we started to realize we probably weren't going to get to the heights that we wanted to. I mean, we were inspired by places like Yarra Yering, of course, and Mount Mary, which is where Mac worked. And that's where my father and I got inspired to have a Yarra Valley vineyard. But I guess we realized we were never going to catch up to those guys. We were never going to be able to make a Cabernet quite as good. And I was really passionate about Nebbiolo, so we thought, let's give this a try. There's probably a bit of luck involved because I feel it was probably a pretty good move, looking at the way things are moving and the sort of wines that we're producing. And I guess we're talking about Pinot Noir and now Nebbiolo. We, over the next 10 years, will probably, as we replant some areas of the vineyard, we'll probably replant areas that were Pinot Noir with Nebbiolo because we feel that has a future as things get a little bit warmer in the Yarra Valley and things start to change. And also the market has started to change. I mean, I joke that Nebbiolo is Pinot Noir for grown-ups, but we all have different opinions about what it is and what's good about it.
What oak do you use, Simon?
So it's French oak. We use 500 litre puncheons. We only use about 20% new oak.
Right.
And I guess because Luke takes his fruit from our vineyard as well. So we always have to have a little bit of a difference. We're probably moving towards larger oak and less new oak as we move forward. And I think we'll probably get to a point where we maybe make a couple of different Nebbiolos, and some will be with new oak, but the majority will be with old large oak, because we love the freshness that retains with Nebbiolo.
How about Mac? How you think about Nebbiolo in Yarra Valley?
Yeah, I think it's great, but I mean, I'm sitting here listening to Simon and Sarah, and as they describe their wines, and obviously we know each other's wines pretty well, but I think the amazing thing for me is that I now look at all Simon's wines through this granite sort of perspective, because I think they're so distinctive. And there is Nebbiolo elsewhere, there's Pinot elsewhere, but you look at the Denton wines, and I just find that underpinning structure is quite sort of cooling and stony and mineral and fresh in a way that many other soils don't sort of present in a similar fashion. And in the same way, the soils at Yarra Yering, well, I think there's probably quite a bit of variation within the vineyard, but there's a really distinctive depth of tannin there, and times almost a fine siltiness that works through a lot of that slightly more rustic, sort of robust structure. And I find, yeah, I think it's something that we're coming to grips with, and the single vineyard properties clearly demonstrate that vividly. But there's two really strong, highly different expressions here, and that's just two sites. And so I think, yeah, look, Nebbiolo is unusual in that it doesn't really seem to suit many places outside of Italy, and yet we've got this incredible expression that is partly Yarra Valley, that lovely medium-bodied, you know, I guess the weight of wines in the Yarra are generally not particularly heavy, and the Nebbiolo seems to carry that in much the same way that we see Cabernet or Pinot, and this medium to even at times when I'm playing with it, light-bodied expression is distinctively ours. So Nebbiolo gets ripe, it does display the varietal characteristics that probably don't get overly alcoholic and stewed, which you can see elsewhere, and yet it walks that fine line. And I think Nebbiolo is, you know, bloody exciting for this region in a way that, you know, probably many other regions struggle. And sunlight seems to be a little more dilute here, where, you know, maybe in other areas the sunlight seems to be far more impactful on the tannins and how they might evolve more rapidly.
Mac, I have a question for you. Given you are the only one who was born and raised in Yarra, and I wanted to ask you that, since you're born, how do you see the revolution in Yarra in winemaking? And also, to me, Yarra is quite an interesting place. You can find every single grape, like Pinot Noir, Shiraz, Bordeaux blend, sparkling. It's basically a small winemaking region. You can just go to find everything that you need to go to: Bordeaux, Rhone, Burgundy, Champagne, Italy now even. So what's your view about Yarra Valley? What people should expect from getting a wine from this region?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a grape growers and winemakers, you know, dream, and it's the marketer's nightmare. Problem and our you know, our enjoyment. But that's what makes it so exciting. I think so many regions get, you know, pushed into a bit of a corner, often on the success of one grape over the others, and then it becomes chicken or the egg. What actually drives that direction towards one grape or one style? And so I always come back to the Yarra Valley is best explained by the style of wine, which is that medium to lighter bodied, lots of perfume, beautiful weighted fruit, and some lovely structures, you know, that are exhibited by the soils they're on. And I think that is quite unique. If you're looking at Cabernet, most regions you're looking at alcohols, you know, couple of percent higher than what we can get Cabernet ripe. And as long as we're not trying to force the wines, and you talk about, we've now got a nice little chapters in our history, and I think where we've made the mistakes is where we've pushed too hard to make full-bodied wines. And lots of oak and lots of ripeness, we lose our identity. And so I think we're just probably getting to the point where, okay, freshness is more on trend now, but maybe we realize we've got to do it well our way. And when we're not on trend, hopefully you do it well enough that you can sustain anyway, as opposed to chasing trends. And part of that comes back to understanding what it means to be on our soils, doing it our way, and strike that balance, which is so crucial.
Sometimes, Mac, when I look through old Yarra Yerings in the cellar, I get to see this beautiful evolution of the wine across the Yarra, and it feels to me like the early years, the 70s and 80s, there was this beautiful elegance, not a lack of intensity, but this kind of lightness to the wines. And then throughout the kind of 2000s in particular, 90s were pretty good, but the 2000s in particular, there was that real over extraction, like too much of the hand of the winemaker in the wines perhaps. And I feel like the region has come back to what it did in the beginning, which is that lovely lightness, elegance. Simon, you used my favorite word, purity, wines of purity and expression of sight. And I feel like that's what they were doing in the early years, and we've kind of come back to that. So everything old is new again.
Maybe that had something to do with what maybe critics were reviewing and consumers were following.
Perhaps, Jeremy, absolutely.
Maybe that was relevant in some other regions of the world as well.
I mean, it may have been the climate as well. So Australia was largely in drought through the 2000s also. So that may have played a hand. So
that's very kind, Sarah. And
I think it was that. But I think after those 2000s, I think it was also a group of winemakers coming through the region with some fresh ideas. They all came out of they were going, we need to go back to these. They respected those older styles, and they also had a very different view on how the wine should be. And I really feel that there was a group of people that came into the Yarra at the end of those 2000s that have made a big difference and sent us in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that the bloody Soms you were talking about?
Sorry?
Is that the bloody sommeliers that were coming through?
No, it wasn't. No, it was definitely the winemakers. We wouldn't take sommeliers back then.
Here's we've got questions. Well, we're really pleased to have Sarah here tonight because you're the only beautiful woman sitting with us. And we've got a question for you. And he asked, is there any difficulty to become a female winemaker in this industry? And that you won the winemaker of the year 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you asked every female winemaker in Australia, you'd get a different story, and that's just because we've all had a different experience. For me, it wasn't necessarily particularly difficult, but I do know that I worked bloody hard. I did feel for a lot of those early years that I was trying to overcompensate for not being physically as strong working in a cellar. And, I'm actually probably pretty lucky that I didn't hurt my body, my back in particular, more at the time. So besides just feeling like I really had to maybe work a little bit harder to prove myself, I really had some great mentors, and I think the people I worked with recognised hard work and dedication. So for me, it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't terrible. It's not been terrible by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah.
All right, thank you guys. Yeah, because now we already have some overrun, but we need to give some payback for our audience for their loyalty. So for now, if anyone you want to buy any wines from Forbes, Yarra Yering, or Denton's wine from our Watson's Wine online shop. So when you check out, you can type this coupon so you can have extra 15% off. So we will work now until next Monday. 好啦，咁大家好啊！咁如果咧，因為多謝你收睇我哋嘅現場直播啦，咁你哋可以抄低呢個曲嘅。咁如果你哋依家上去我哋屈臣氏酒窖嘅網店啦，咁揀取任何 Forbes 咁 Yarra Yering 或者 Denton 嘅酒啦，跟住喺 check out 嗰度打翻呢個曲咧，就會有額外嘅85折嘅。Alright, so yeah, thanks guys. So but and something about next week first, because for next week at the same time at 7 p.m. Hong Kong time, next Friday, we will have another Watson's Hour. For next week, we will move to Barossa Valley. We will go to explore the magic of the old wine from Barossa Valley. So we will have a letter from Elton Wines and also read from the Kessler Wines. So stay tuned and see you next week. Oh, and yeah, Meg, Sarah, and Simon, yeah, thanks for joining us. Really, thanks. And have a good evening and have a good weekend. Yep, cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, just turn it on.